welcome to my channel. I'm Michelle, and around here we talk about 18th century women's history and what it's like to be a rookie novelist. Today I want to talk to you about 3 books that I read in 2024 that really stood out for me. Now, in the description box below, I'm going to include an article that goes into a deeper dive on all 3 of these books. And I'll also include a list of all the reading that I did in 2024. But for now, let's get started. The first book I want to talk about is Good Wives, Nasty Wenches, and Anxious Patriarchs by Kathleen Brown. This book talks about how the development of the planter class really contracted women's autonomy and created a society based on a foundation of patriarchy and racism. I actually want to read a paragraph straight from the book because I think it captures kind of the theme of the book so clearly. Kathleen Brown writes, by the early 18th century, Virginia's political system had achieved a stability built on the division of white and black laborers, the recognition of all white men as potential patriarchs, and an incipient Anglo-Virginian identity that rested precariously upon the fragile bonds uniting white men. Unrest within the colonial society had been stilled, albeit temporarily, through the masculinization of political culture, the feminization and marginalization of speech offenses, and the racialization of bound labor. I have to admit, reading this book could be really frustrating. It's hard to read about people losing their rights. And this book very clearly shows how white men pulled back the rights of women and black people. But like with all history, even when it's at its darkest, there are shines of light. And Kathleen Brown does talk about how women and black people fought back. Now, I had actually known about this book for a really long time, and I don't know why I waited so long to read it because it is spectacular. And in fact, I think you'll be seeing information from this book quite a bit in videos and content that I put together going forward. I am going to include in this description box below a link to a piece that I did on women traveling in the 18th century because I did pull some good information from this book for that article, so that can give you a glimpse of what you might expect going forward. So the next book I want to talk about is a novel. It's called Catherine by Anya Seton. If you love historical fiction, or if you're new to historical fiction and you really want the gold standard, this is it. So Catherine is a retelling of the relationship between Catherine Swynford and John of Gaunt. It goes through their affair, their separation, their eventual marriage. And no, I'm not giving anything away. This is just the history. But Seton is a vivid storyteller. The scenes are just fantastic. And in fact, I've been reading The Eagle and the Heart by Helen Castor. And this book actually is the real history behind some of the scenes that Seton wrote. And as I've been reading the real history, in my mind, I've been thinking about scenes from the novel. She is so good. This is one of those books where I do recommend you read the foreword for sure. She talks about how she had trouble writing this book a little bit because she had trouble getting things out of the archives. She was writing this shortly after World War II, and so she just offers a really interesting glimpse of what day-to-day life was during that time. This book has actually been in publication since 1954. It's still very popular, and historical fiction lovers and historical fiction writers and critics just love it. So, Catherine by Anya Seton, highly recommended. So the final book that I want to talk about is Deep Water, The World in the Ocean. This is written by James Bradley. He is a poet, and wow, does it show. This is such a beautifully written book. He finds that sweet spot pulling in experts from history and philosophy and science and the arts to demonstrate just how clearly the health of our oceans determines the health of our humanity. Now, I know you come here for history, and there is a ton of history in this book. Everything from kind of the evolutions of the oceans and the lives within them, trade routes, recreation. He covers it all, and it's fantastic. But since we focus on the 18th century around here, I want to talk to you a little bit about white swimming. So in the 18th century, indigenous cultures in Australia, in the American colonies, Africans were all swimming using an overhand stroke. That was just their natural way of swimming. In Europe, the breaststroke was becoming more popularized. It was portrayed as being more scientific and a more elite way to swim. And yes, they did indeed call it white swimming. As I mentioned in the beginning, I'm going to include a link to an article that goes into a bit more of a deeper dive on each of these books. If you've read these books, I'd love to know what you think about them. If you decide to read these books based on what you learned about them here, I hope you enjoy them as much as I did. But for now, thanks for getting nerdy with me, and I'll see you in the next video.